Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lunar Orbit podcast, where I provide timely updates and fresh thoughts on the Terra lunar ecosystem. Today is Tuesday, the 1st of February 2022. My name is Gerry. Let's get into it. So, firstly, just want to summarize what I'm going to cover today and have a quick chat about the general state of the market and UST in particular, and also a new proposal from the Anchor protocol. Then I'm going to chat about WhiteWhale and their community call. Next up is Stata Labs and what they've got going on. Some pretty exciting stuff coming out there. And also sort of dovetailing into that is some staking as a service and service for staking from CoinHall and DYOR. So first up, UST. It's been a pretty turbulent time in the markets, as you've no doubt seen. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of tweet threads that go through UST, how it works, and clears up some misconceptions and a bit of the FUD that's been around, especially with the issues relating to the degen box strategy and magic internet money, and how that has kind of blown up, and it's resulted in a lot of UST being basically minted back into Luna, and some inflation in Luna for the first time in a good while, which has compounded the problems with the price action. So this tweet thread here from Route2Fi, highly recommend giving him a follow on Twitter. I won't read it because it's quite lengthy, but he does a great job of explaining it to the point where Kanav here, who's part of the Luna Foundation Guard, retweeted him, and he also had his own little thread on it as well, explaining how everything works together and why UST should still be in a strong position. So despite all that drama, it did pretty well. The peg held up pretty well, depending on who you ask. One thing about checking the data feeds for the peg, it's important to go to the Chainlink oracles themselves rather than something like CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko, because they might be just looking at one exchange like Coinbase or whatever. So here we can see where most of the liquidity lies and how it depegged by about 1 cent during all that turmoil. So it held up pretty darn well, because even USDC and DAI and Tether often depeg by similar amounts during volatility. So it's been its first big test since the big drawdown we had in May, where Luna fell 78% in a matter of days. So at the moment, I think it's reached about a 55% pullback, plus had a lot of downward pressure, and it's still held up quite well. So somewhat relating to that is this proposal with the Anchor protocol, where they're going to increase the loan to value ratio threshold before you get liquidated from 60% to 80%. So what that means is basically people are going to have 20% more borrowing capacity and have 20% more headroom before they get liquidated potentially. So that would have saved a lot of people getting liquidated. In saying that, the more leverage you can get in the system, quite often more people will take up that leverage. So it's still something that they'll have to manage, but that will give a lot of people within Anchor some breathing space. So it's effectively already passed. I think it's 7 days from the time that it finishes. I could be wrong there though. So, we've probably got 8 to 10 days before this is actually implemented, but it's going to help a lot of people not have to be forced sellers to cover their debts in Anchor, which is also overall a good thing for the system. As we can see with SmartStake, on their Terra Analytics page, we had our first inflationary day with Luna, if I can find the chart here, in some time. So there it is there. So that was due to this degen box unwinding and people trying to get out of UST and basically pay down their loans within Magic Internet Money. So they'd basically they had used UST as collateral to mint more MIM, Magic Internet Money, which they could then borrow against to get more UST and repeat the process. So they looped it about 6 or 7 times, and we're getting about 160% APY on US dollars, which sounds quite incredible and sometimes too good to be true. So because of the issues that protocol's had, a lot of people have basically caused a bit of a bank run on MIM. So a lot of Luna's been minted to cover those positions. And that compounded the price action that we had, as I said earlier. Just on the price, we're back to around $50, which is actually only taking us back to pretty much the start of December. So we basically lost about 2 months worth of price action because we went from about $50 all the way up to 103, and now we've pulled right back down to 50 in the space of 8 weeks or so. But the key difference is we've got a lot more UST minted. So we had about 7.5 billion when we were about at $50, and now we're at I think it's 11.3 billion UST. So fundamentally, we're stronger than ever. We've survived a really big scare with flying colors, if you ask me. So that's pretty bullish long term. Okay, next up I wanted to talk about was WhiteWhale. Every 2 weeks they have a community call on Terra, Twitter Spaces. The Terra Spaces cover it with their Spotify and also on Twitter directly if you want to listen to them. So basically, just an update on where they're at. So they've been waiting for some audits to come back. One of them's come back and was really positive. The second one hasn't come back yet because the auditors were a bit concerned because they couldn't find anything wrong in it. So they wanted to get some extra engineers to have another look at it to see if they could find anything wrong. And so far they haven't been able to, but it's delayed things a little. But it sounds like that's about to drop if it hasn't dropped already. So WhiteWhale are really confident that they should be able to get their first vaults up within 2 weeks, which will be great because it means community funds can come in with UST to help defend the peg and help prevent things like this happening where we lose our peg. So that's important for the confidence in UST in general and just the ecosystem in general. So that sounded really positive. That's their main focus at the moment, but they're also trying to build out a back-end infrastructure that will allow them to compete with some of the other big players in the space, some of the institutional money that's doing ARBs. So that should be useful. One thing that they will also provide is flash loans as a service. So anyone in the community can come and trigger off a flash loan using their infrastructure once it's fully built out. And that's a good competitive advantage because institutions are not going to allow anyone to just come and use their infrastructure because basically they're trying to shut out competition, not allow people to use their stuff. So it's a good point of difference for WhiteWhale. Could capture some funds that way. The other thing that they're going to do is also allow for large purchases of Luna. So if you're a whale and you want to buy, $250,000 worth of Luna, you could come and use WhiteWhale to do it, and then they'll arb away the slippage, and you might get, maybe $1,000 more value or $2,000 more value, depending on how effective it is at the time. So that's another thing people can use WhiteWhale for, which is really cool. All right, next up is Stata Labs and what they've got going on. So really enjoyed listening to this on Terra Spaces. They've got a lot going on, Stader. So one thing that they're looking to implement is, they're calling it, degen box style strategies. They're probably not going to actually call it that, but basically ways to leverage your Luna stack to get more Luna in a safe way. So they've got Luna X, which is the liquid staking derivative of Luna, which means it's staked in the background on validators, but it's also freely tradable, so it's liquid, which is great. It means it's composable within DeFi, but also means you don't have to unbond and wait 21 days to 24 days to get your Luna back. So a lot of people are going to want that liquidity when they need it, but it also means that they can do a lot more cool things with it. So one thing they're going to do is create different risk tranches, sort of inspired by the same concept as Barnbridge or Saffron Finance, if you're familiar with those on Ethereum, where basically you can create tranches of risk. It's a traditional finance thing. This is, used all over the place in derivatives in the background. These are sophisticated financial instruments. But basically you can have a lower risk tranche and higher risk tranches that have higher yield, but obviously a higher risk of being liquidated. But Stader's going to set it up that their low risk tranche cannot be liquidated because the high risk tranches are going to cover any losses that occur. So they'll have much higher yield, but much higher risk. So having a tranche that's low risk and lower yield is going to be very attractive because if you can't get liquidated, but you can get 10% more Luna compounded and get all your staking rewards, that's going to be super popular. It's basically almost just like a tick box. Do I want 10% more Luna? Yes, please, sir, I do. And it should be that simple. So a lot of people are going to want to have that extra upside for basically no risk. So that was one thing that Stader's doing. Another thing that they've mentioned is going to happen is some people have sort of not complained, but wanted a bit more granularity in terms of being able to pick validators and use Stader, because they're a bit worried that potentially things could get a bit concentrated into, say, the top 5 or 10 validators on Stader's platform. But they're going to open this up so individual validators can be chosen, still using the Stader protocol. One of the reasons for doing that is we're seeing things like on CoinHall here, a stake to subscribe model, which is really cool. So CoinHall, if you're not familiar with them, they're kind of like the CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko for Luna. Really, really useful for real-time statistics and whatnot. But they're going to have stake to subscribe model, so you can stake your Luna to their validator and you get extra services enabled, basically. So this model I think is going to be massive over time, and I feel like basically over time a lot of people are going to use their proof of stake assets almost like their piggy banks, digital piggy banks, because proof of stake assets generate yield, and yield is very hard to find in the current financial markets. It's generally an appreciating asset over time, and if you can unlock extra things, functionality out of it, it makes a lot of sense. So this is why I'm super bullish on Stader long term. It's probably my thing I'm most bullish of in all of crypto outside of Luna itself. And now they're starting to turn the tap on for some of these extra services to be opened up. So it's not just CoinHall that are going to be doing this. DYOR, who I've mentioned before on the show, he's a brilliant YouTuber. He's almost become a quasi-marketing person for individual protocols within Luna, because he's so good at pulling apart how the protocols work and explaining it in a way that's easy to understand. So definitely give him a follow, jump on his YouTube. But basically what he's doing here is going to be a stake as a service, or subscribe via staking. And basically, rather than having a paywall or his own site or his own social token that you have to buy, you can just stake some Luna to Danku's validator and unlock extra resources and content that he opens up. So it's a really brilliant model. I can see it being sustainable over time. And in future, you'll see an awful lot more things pop up. In fact, let's just have a quick listen to this part of the podcast about what State is doing.
We have also been talking to several validators. Some of them are funds, some of them are hedge funds that run their own validators. They are planning to actually give out trading tips based on their strategies to their own stakers. And other validators are trying to bring in things like discounts on health insurance subscriptions or discounts on Web2 subscriptions like Netflix, Amazon, etc.
So as you can see there, validators over time are going to be allowing you to get extra services. So it might be staked against our validator and you get half price or free Netflix for the year. Things like that. It's going to get super popular, super competitive, and it should over time help with decentralizing the networks further, which is great. So here's another thread on who Daki is using to spin up his validator. Daki Capital, I believe they're called. So the reason I wanted to bring this tweet up is they've got some really cool links in here on stuff I haven't checked out myself yet, but they've got an NFT tracker for sales on Random Earth, so that looks pretty handy. And they've also got a whale wallets tracker as well, so you can see what the whales are up to. Anyway, I just thought that was some handy alpha there. So on the same concept, Terabytes, hopefully you've heard of them. These guys are brilliant producers in the space. They create an awful lot of content, and they're one of the very first ones out there. So I've learned an awful lot through these guys. They already have a validator as well, so they might move to this subscription model too over time. If not, I still think it's nice to pledge a bit of Luna to the people that are helping build out the ecosystem, not just from a technical level, but also the consumer facing and education side as well. So consider validating some Luna to their node. And yeah, that's all I've got for today, guys. I hope that was useful. Thanks very much for listening.